for the first time in their lives, millions of Americans are going to pay zero income tax. And you might be thinking you missed something on the nightly news recently, but that's not the case. It's not on the federal level. It's on the state level. And this hasn't happened for over 45 years, but now 2 states are on the path to totally eliminate income tax. And many other states are dramatically decreasing their taxes. So let's jump in and see what's going on here. We're going to go to Associated Press. The article is called "No State Has Axed Its Income Tax on Wages in 45 Years. Now 2 southern states are on a path to do so." But before we jump into that article, I want to share the broader picture, not just these 2 states, but what many states are doing in reducing taxes across the board. And to do that, I want to jump into a different Associated Press article. It's called "Trump Wants to Cut Taxes. So do governors and lawmakers in some states." The article goes on to say the push to zero out the income tax is perhaps the most aggressive example of tax cutting trend that is sweeping across states as they rebound from COVID-19 pandemic with surge in revenues and historical surpluses. And that was because of the stimulus payments. That second article that we're talking about here says, as Congress considers Trump's tax cutting agenda, state legislatures that are currently getting underway are weighing whether or how much they can afford to reduce their own taxes while still funding core government functions such as schools, prisons, roads, and social services. Now, here's the key part. Unlike the federal government, which can run a deficit, states generally must adopt a balanced budget. And because they can't run a deficit, it's even harder for states to give up a revenue source, which is why we haven't seen a state do this in 45 years. Okay. The article goes on to say, what are states doing on income taxes? It starts off with Kentucky. We're going to get back to Kentucky later. Kentucky was quick out of the gates with its 2025 legislative session. The Republican-led House passed and sent to the Senate a bill that would lower individual income tax by 0.5 percentage points to 3.5% effective in 2026. And their Democratic governor, Andy Beshear, has signaled support for it. And if enacted, it would be the state's 3rd rate cut since 2023. Elsewhere, Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe has talked about phasing out income tax, and Montana Governor Greg Gianforte, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, and South Carolina Henry McMaster all propose additional income tax rate cuts. So this is fairly broad. Utah Governor Spencer Cox has proposed ending the state's tax on Social Security benefits, while Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin has proposed eliminating the state income tax on tips and helping to offset a car tax for low and middle income earners. So you can see this is pretty broad based. Mississippi, the Republican-led House, on Thursday passed and sent to the Senate legislation that would gradually eliminate the income tax, reduce the sales tax on groceries, and partially offset that by raising local sales tax and gas taxes. This is going to be a theme that we're going to see is moving away from an income tax and moving towards what I would call a consumption tax. The article goes on to say new income tax cuts recently enacted in Louisiana are being partially offset by sales tax hikes. And all those governors above are Republican. There was one Democrat in there. But Democrat New York Kathy Hochul has also unveiled a sweeping plan that would cut income taxes for most people in New York and expanded the state's child tax credit and send New Yorkers up to $500 of what she bills as an inflation refund. Okay, how about other taxes? So we've been talking about income taxes, but what about other taxes? North Dakota Republican Governor Kelly Armstrong has proposed gradually cutting property taxes on people's homes by tapping into earnings from the state's oil tax savings. And the goal is to eventually completely wipe out property tax. In Wyoming, conservative Freedom Caucus members who won control of the House want to slash residential property tax by 25%. So now we see that this is a broad move by the states. And now let's zoom in on the states that, if completely eliminated, would be the first states in 45 years to eliminate their income tax. We're going back to that article that says no state has accessed income tax on wages in 45 years. Now 2 southern states are on a path to do so. And they share about Alaska. When Alaska repealed its personal income tax in 1980, it did so because the state coffers were overflowing with billions of dollars in oil money. In fact, I believe in Alaska, people still get a tax refund, a stipend. So instead of paying income tax, their citizens get a cut of the earnings from their oil fund. The article has a quote here. "It's a lot easier to go without an individual income tax if you've, the state, never levied one," said Catherine Loghead, a senior analyst and research manager at the nonprofit Tax Foundation. But once you become dependent on that revenue, the state income tax, it's a lot more difficult to phase out or eliminate that tax, which is why it's hard, which is why we haven't seen it in 45 years. Okay, so what's Mississippi doing? Republican Mississippi Governor Kate Reeves recently signed a law reducing the state's income tax from 4% to 3% by 2030 and setting state revenue growth benchmarks that could trigger additional incremental cuts until the tax is eliminated, completely eliminated. The law also reduces the sales tax on groceries and raises the gasoline tax. So reducing, in this case, eliminating the tax on groceries, which is something obviously we all need to have, and then increasing a consumption tax, which in this case is gasoline. Okay, so that's Mississippi. What about Kentucky? A 2022 Kentucky law reduced the state's income tax rate in a series and set a series of revenue-based triggers that could gradually lower the tax to zero. But unlike in Mississippi, the triggers are not automatic. Rather, the Kentucky General Assembly must approve each additional decrease in the tax rate. So we can see that this is broad-reaching. It's not just one state, it's several states. And it's hard to do this, but the states have to have a balanced budget. Most states do. So just like you and I, they have figured out a way, okay, this is the dollars that we have coming in. How do we do everything that we need to do with that money? And probably like many of us, the states have, these are the necessities and these are the wants, and then these are the extras. And for us as individuals, I tell folks, if you can keep your necessities, things like rent, things like utility, things like gas to get back and forth to work, if you can keep that to 50%, if you can keep your wants to 30%, things like the cardboard boxes that show up at our front porches, then that leaves 20% for savings. The states don't have 20% left over for savings, but it does look like many of them are on a path to reduce their taxes. If you like this video, the YouTube algorithm says this is my next video you should watch. Thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye.